Marry him, or you're no longer my daughter.
Marry him, or you're no longer my daughter. The word struck Amara harder than any slap ever could. For several seconds, nobody moved. The noisy mechanic workshop seemed to fall silent. Even the sound of metal hitting metal from the other side of the yard disappeared beneath the weight of her father's ultimatum. Amara stared at him. Then she looked at the man standing beside her. Daniel. His hands were still stained with grease. His faded work shirt was covered in tiny marks from years of repairing engines. A wrench hung from his belt, and there was a small cut above his eyebrow from the car he had been working on that morning. He looked nothing like the wealthy men her father usually invited into their home. And that was exactly why her father hated him. Behind them stood the man her father wanted her to marry. Mr. Kingsley. He was old enough to be her father. His expensive purple suit stood out against the dusty workshop, and the gold watch around his wrist probably cost more than everything inside the mechanic's shop combined. He smiled. Not warmly. He smiled like a man who had already won. Amara slowly turned back toward her father. Daddy. Don't call me Daddy right now. Her father's voice was cold. You heard what I said. Daniel stepped forward. Sir, please. Stay out of this. The older man pointed directly at him. You are the reason my daughter has become stubborn. You have filled her head with foolish ideas about love. Daniel swallowed. I love your daughter. Her father laughed. A short, bitter laugh. Love? He looked around the dirty workshop. This? He pointed at Daniel's clothes. This is what you think you can give my daughter? Amara stepped between them. Enough. Her voice shook, but she didn't move. My life is not something you can sell. Her father stared at her. Sell? He slowly shook his head. You have no idea what I have sacrificed for you. I know what you've sacrificed, Amara replied. But that doesn't mean you own my future. Her father's jaw tightened. Then he looked at Daniel. Young man, I will give you one chance to be sensible. Walk away from my daughter. Daniel looked at Amara. She was crying now, but she wasn't looking at her father. She was looking at him. And in that look, Daniel saw everything. Fear. Pain. But also a silent question. Are you going to leave me? Daniel took a breath. No. Her father's face hardened. No. I won't leave her. The older man stepped closer. Then you have chosen poverty for her. Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he reached for Amara's hand. She took it. That small gesture made her father furious. Fine. He turned away. Marry Kingsley, or forget that you ever had a father. Amara's lips trembled. You can't mean that. I do. Kingsley stepped forward. Amara, don't make this harder than it has to be. She looked at him. I would rather struggle with the man I love than spend one day married to a man I don't. For the first time, Kingsley's smile disappeared. Her father pointed toward the gate. Then leave. Amara stared at him. Her own father was telling her to leave. So she did. She grabbed Daniel's hand, and together they walked out of the workshop. Neither of them knew that someone had been watching them from a black SUV parked across the street. And neither of them knew that the decision Amara had just made was about to expose a secret that had been hidden for almost 10 years. Daniel and Amara had met 3 years earlier. She had been driving home when her car suddenly broke down near the mechanic shop. She had been furious. She was wearing a white dress, expensive shoes, and carrying a designer handbag. She had no idea how to open the hood of a car, let alone fix one. Daniel had walked over. Car trouble. She had looked at him suspiciously. Can you fix it? He smiled. I can try. You'd better. He laughed. That's a lot of pressure for someone who just met you. She didn't laugh. But when he fixed the problem in less than 20 minutes, something changed. She thanked him. He refused the money. I only replaced a small fuse. You still worked. Then buy me lunch. She stared at him. You're joking. Very serious. That was the beginning. They started talking. Then they started meeting. Then they fell in love. Amara's family hated the relationship from the beginning. Her father had always believed his daughter should marry into wealth. To him, marriage was not about romance. It was about power. Connections. Business. Status. Daniel had none of those things. At least, that's what everyone believed. Daniel never talked about his family. He never talked about money. He never talked about the past. Whenever Amara asked, he simply said, "I grew up learning that money can disappear. Character is harder to replace." She thought it was just something a poor man said because he had nothing. She didn't know Daniel had once been one of the most powerful young businessmen in the country. She didn't know he had deliberately disappeared. And she certainly didn't know why. Years earlier, Daniel's father had built a massive construction empire. The company owned hotels, apartment complexes, shopping centers, and several major construction projects. When Daniel was 24, he became involved in the family business. He was brilliant. But his father's business partner, Victor, saw him as a threat. Victor wanted control of the company. So he framed Daniel. Millions of dollars disappeared from company accounts. Documents were forged. Daniel was blamed. Before the police could arrest him, Daniel disappeared. His father died months later. Everyone believed Daniel had fled because he was guilty. But Daniel had secretly spent years collecting evidence. He changed his name. He lived simply. He became a mechanic. And he waited. He wasn't hiding because he was afraid. He was waiting for the right moment to destroy the man who had destroyed his family. That moment had finally arrived. The next morning, Amara woke up in a small apartment. Daniel was already awake. He was sitting beside the window, staring at his phone. She walked toward him. "What are you looking at?" Daniel quickly locked the screen. "Nothing." She smiled sadly. "Are you okay?" He looked at her. "I should be asking you that. My father doesn't want me anymore." Daniel stood. "Don't say that. He said I wasn't his daughter anymore. He said it because he was angry." "No." Amara wiped her tears. "He meant it." Daniel walked toward her. "You chose me. That doesn't mean you lost your father." She looked into his eyes. "What if you were wrong?" "About what?" "What if my father was right? What if I ruined my life because of you?" Daniel stared at her. Then he reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small key. Amara frowned. "What is that?" "My answer." "To what?" "To everything." He placed the key in her hand. "Come with me." They drove for nearly an hour. Daniel stopped outside a large gated property. Amara looked through the windshield. Her eyes widened. "Daniel." He didn't speak. The gates opened. They drove inside. A massive modern mansion stood at the center of the property. There were security guards. Luxury cars. Beautiful gardens. And a private driveway longer than the street where Daniel had lived. Amara slowly turned toward him. "Whose house is this?" Daniel looked at her. "Mine." She laughed nervously. "Stop joking." "I'm not." He stepped out of the car. She followed. Inside the house, everything changed. The man she knew as a mechanic walked through the mansion as if he had lived there his entire life. Because he had. A woman in her 60s came running down the staircase. The moment she saw Daniel, she covered her mouth. "My God." Daniel stopped. "Mrs. Rose." The woman began crying. "You're alive." She hugged him tightly. Amara stood frozen. Daniel gently pulled away. "Where's everyone?" Mrs. Rose looked at him. "Waiting for you." "Who?" Before she could answer, several people entered the room. Executives. Lawyers. Security officers. And an elderly man carrying a thick black folder. He walked directly to Daniel. "Mr. Blackwell." Amara's heart stopped. Blackwell. That name was famous. She had heard it on television. Blackwell Holdings. One of the largest private construction and investment companies in the country. She looked at Daniel. No. He looked at her. Yes. Her mouth opened. You're Daniel Blackwell. She took a step backward. The billionaire? He nodded. But why? Daniel looked down. Because I needed everyone to believe I had nothing. Amara sat down. Her mind couldn't process it. All those times she had seen him repairing broken cars. All those times he had refused expensive gifts. All those times he had told her he didn't care about money. It had all been true. He really didn't care about money. Because he had already had more than enough. The elderly lawyer opened the folder. Mr. Blackwell, everything is ready. The court has accepted the evidence we recovered. Victor's financial records, the forged documents, the offshore transfers. Daniel nodded. Good. Amara stood. Wait. Everyone looked at her. She looked at Daniel. Is that why my father wanted me to marry Kingsley? Daniel's face changed. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. Kingsley wasn't just a wealthy businessman. He was Victor's closest associate. For years, he had been helping Victor hide the money stolen from Daniel's family. Amara's father had recently entered a business partnership with Kingsley. And Kingsley had promised him access to a fortune. Her father's sudden obsession with the marriage had never been about protecting Amara. It had been about money. Kingsley needed Amara's family. And Amara's father wanted Kingsley's wealth. But there was something neither man knew. Daniel had already uncovered everything. 3 days later, the family gathered at Amara's father's mansion. Her father sat at the head of the dining table. Kingsley sat beside him. He looked confident. Amara entered with Daniel. Her father immediately stood. You came back. Amara didn't answer. Kingsley looked at Daniel and laughed. This man. He looked at Amara. You actually brought him here. Daniel remained silent. Kingsley shook his head. You had a chance to marry me. Then he looked at her father. She's clearly made her decision. Amara's father looked disappointed. You still have time. Amara stepped forward. No. Her father frowned. No. I don't need time. She took Daniel's hand. I chose him when he had nothing. She looked directly at Kingsley. And I would choose him even if he never had a single dollar. Kingsley laughed. That's very touching. Then Daniel placed a folder on the table. The laughter stopped. What is that? Daniel looked at him. Your future. Kingsley opened the folder. His face changed. Page after page. Bank transfers. Property documents. Secret accounts. Photographs. Recorded conversations. Everything. His hands began shaking. Victor stood. You. Daniel looked at him. You thought I disappeared because you defeated me. Victor couldn't speak. I disappeared because I wanted you to become careless. Daniel stepped closer. You took my father's company. You destroyed his name. You made everyone believe I was a criminal. He placed another document on the table. But you forgot one thing. Victor stared at him. What? Daniel smiled. I learned from you. Police officers entered the room. Victor immediately tried to run. They stopped him. Kingsley began shouting that he had nothing to do with it. But the evidence said otherwise. Amara's father stood frozen. He looked at Daniel. Then at his daughter. He suddenly understood everything. He had rejected the man he believed was poor. He had tried to force his daughter into the arms of a criminal. And he had nearly destroyed his own family chasing money. Amara. She looked at him. He walked toward her. I was wrong. She said nothing. I was so focused on wealth that I couldn't see the person standing in front of me. Daniel looked at Amara. Her father continued. I thought I was protecting you. You weren't, she whispered. He lowered his head. I know. Silence filled the room. Then Amara stepped closer. You hurt me. Her father's eyes filled with tears. I know. You told me I was no longer your daughter. I was angry. You can't take those words back. I know. Amara looked at him for a long moment. Then she hugged him. Not because she had forgotten. Not because everything was suddenly fine. But because sometimes forgiveness begins with admitting that the wound was real. Her father held her tightly. And Daniel stood quietly beside them. Months later, Amara and Daniel were married. There was no forced arrangement. No business deal. No billionaire contract. Just two people who had chosen each other before they knew what the other possessed. At the wedding, Amara's father stood beside her. When the time came to give his daughter away, he looked at Daniel. Then he smiled. You know, he whispered, I once told her to marry you or lose me. Daniel smiled. Yes, sir. Her father shook his head. I was a fool. Daniel looked at Amara. No. He paused. You were just looking at the wrong thing. Her father smiled. What was I looking at? His clothes, Amara said. Her father laughed. And what should I have been looking at? Amara took Daniel's hand. His heart. The music began. The couple walked toward the altar. And somewhere behind them, the mechanic shop where their story had started still stood exactly as it had before. Old. Dusty. Simple. But Daniel never closed it. He kept it open because it reminded him of the one place where Amara had loved him without knowing his name, his fortune, or his family. She had loved the man beneath the grease. And that was the one thing money could never buy.